The Elements of Friendship, Book 1, Harmony, Chapter 1, The Mare and the Moon, by Armars Delegund. The capital city of the diarchy of Equestria, named Canterlot, was as much of a work of art as it was a work of thaumaturgy. It was built more than halfway up the south-facing mountainside of Alicorn's Peak, the tallest mountain in the North Equus Mountains overlooking the Saddle Valley. For the city's construction would have been impossible, if not for the thaumaturgical work of the unicorns of old. Canterlot's foundations were built into the nearly vertical side of the mountain itself, with a cliff face only 24 holes across leading into the city's main gate. Almost the entirety of the city hung over the Saddle Valley, almost 24 megacross holes below, its pony-made waterfalls disintegrating into a fine mist that made for an ideal spot for Pegasi to spread their rainbows. Canterlot itself was widely considered one of the most beautiful locales in all of Harmonia. Its sparkling ivory towers, peaked with gold, easily added another 6 megagross hooves to the city's height. Low-hanging clouds that Pegasi strategically placed about the minarets lent additional awe-inspiring atmosphere. Its courtyards, the West Castle Courtyard, known colloquially as the Courtyard of the Moon, and the East Castle Courtyard, the Courtyard of the Sun, were spaces of great beauty, whether you wanted to take a nap, to think, to graze, or to sip from the stream. It was not uncommon to see folks from around the globe, zebras, murres, giraffes, deer, centaurs, minotaurs, chillin, hippolytrions, and even the odd griffin, taking the journey to Equestria just to bask in the magnificence of Canterlot. Once you were in the city, you could easily forget that you were almost a hot mile off the ground. The wide city streets were paved with the highest quality of cobblestone, with many parks set aside for grazing and simple relaxation. If you wanted to do something, you could likely find a means to do it in Canterlot. There were many bookshops in Canterlot, boutiques and restaurants, concert halls and theaters, art galleries and racetracks, observatories and planetariums. Jailhouses were nowhere to be found in Canterlot. Crime was a seldom occurrence in even the most seedy establishment of Equestria, and Canterlot was hardly seedy. The harmony that Queen Celestia had strived for so earnestly since he first set the throne almost 24 and a half gross years ago was now a reality. None of this was on Twilight Sparkle's mind as he galloped at full speed through the streets of Canterlot, ignoring the calls and cries of other ponies as he passed them by. Though she was a ward of the crown, which gave her the same ranking of a princess, she did not care for stature or appearance at the moment. She had to get home. Why, oh, why was her favorite reading spot such a distance from her home? After pushing her way past a particularly ornery centaur, Twilight arrived, with a stitch in the barrel of her chest, at the ivory library tower. The uppermost level, a golden bulb, was where Twilight lived alone with her books. Well, not quite alone. Reaching the top of the staircase that spiraled around the ivory library tower, Twilight entered the wards to prevent any pony, or any one for that matter, from passing without her permission. Her horn glowing pink, the double doors began bearing a sign which read, Twilight Sparkle's quarters, swung inwardly violently. Ouch! Twilight winced. She had not anticipated that Spike was behind the doors as she opened them. Spike, are you all right? She asked, using her Dwemer shimmer to help the young Drake pull himself up. Spike was a dragon cub of about a dozen years, which meant that he was still a baby by dragon standards. He was light mulberry, with the moderate harlequin spines along his head and back, pistachio-colored eyes, and lime-green-colored frills flanking his face. His underbelly was a light spring buttish gray. He could walk on all fours like a pony, though he preferred to walk on his hind legs, using his claws to help carry Twilight's books. He was presently using his claws, though, to rub his head where the double doors had bumped him. Ugh, I'm fine, Mom, he muttered. Ahem! Twilight fixed him with a firm glare. Spike sighed. Fine. Twilight, he groaned, pulling around to pull the rough gift off his spade-shaped tail. Twilight's ear twitched. What's that? Spike pulled a teddy bear, stuffing poking out of a large hole of its body, out of the wrapping paper. His nose wrinkled slightly. Well, it was a gift for Moondancer. Twilight rolled her eyes, and Spike followed suit. This was no loss. Moon Dancer was always trying to get on Twilight's good side, trying to mooch her way into a place of higher social standing by riding the coattails of Queen Celestia's #1 student. She had reached a new low now, bribery. Well, it wouldn't work.
You know what to do with this, Spike. The same as all of our previous invitations. More importantly, have you rotated Mom and Dad to match the sun's place in the sky?
You bet, Twilight! Spike said brightly, as he dropped a busted present and teddy bear in a wastebasket, already almost full of unanswered invitations to other social gatherings around Canterlot. He then took a deep breath and exhaled a blast of sparkling green fire. Soon, all that was left in the wastebasket was a pile of ash. Grand, your parents are still soaking up the sun. Twilight strode past Spike, who followed her out of the foyer into the living room, which was really more of a miniature library in of itself. The centerpiece, in lieu of some form of couch or seating cushions, was a large hourglass filled with sand that flowed from the bottom bowl to the top. It was a conversation piece he had paid hard-built bits for, and it was one of the most prized possessions of Star-Swirl the Bearded, one of Twilight Sparkle's favorite thaumaturgists of old, crafter of hundreds of spells. The ancient mage was revered in many circles of magic. Passing through the living room to the ceiling to the floor windows that made up the opposite wall, Twilight trotted onto the balcony, overlooking the Saddle Valley over a mile below. The view of the Saddle Valley, in which rested a humble hamlet at the ends of the wild evergreen forest, on the south of Equinus Mountains, beyond which could be seen the distant rolling hills of the San Palemo Desert, was ignored by Twilight, as her drummer Shimmer drew a watering can from a nearby table. Smiling sadly, she watered an agrave and a cactus, which Spike had placed on the westernmost side of the balcony, for the afternoon sunlight.
Good afternoon, Mom,
she said softly to the agrave.
Good afternoon, Vati,
she said quickly to the cactus. Spike clung to Twilight's left hind leg, sniffling slightly at the pair of potted plants. Twilight turned to Spike, placing the watering can on the floor between the agave and cactus.
Spike, it doesn't really make sense for you to call me Mom, or my parents Grandmom or Grandpa,
Twilight explained clinically. She smiled in what she thought was a comforting way as she rubbed Spike's head with her right forehoof.
I'm not your biological mother. All I did was magically incubate your egg as my entry test to Queen Celestia School for Gifted Unicorns.
Which makes you my mom! Spike cried.
I just happened upon something that could be of vital importance to the future of Equestria.
No, Harmonia, Twilight said, ignoring Spike's continuing pleas. Spike sighed. This was par for the course when making arguments for calling Twilight his mother. Are we supposed to be on break,
Twilight?
Not anymore, she said, cantering back to the living room. I need you to help me find that book of prophecies and predictions. Which one?
Anyone within the past 1,000 years shall do,
she said offensively, her drummer Simmer already calling forth several books from the shelves of several bookcases. By Spike's own admission, his own capacity for help was minuscule when Twilight was in the zone. She could use her Dwemer Shimmer to hold at least one gross book on an easy day. Still, she was just a single pony. A brilliant mare, but a lone mare nonetheless. And she could only pursue one book at a time. Any help to sift through the books for what she was looking for was a blessing. Still, a megarosum of prophecies was a large area to cast one's net into. Any prophecy in particular? Spike dared to venture.
The Mare and the Moon,
Twilight said shortly, a half-dozen books circling around her head.
As it just so happened,
Spike had pulled a dusty old tome from the back of the bookshelf, and the dust made him sneeze. Thankfully, it was not a sparky sneeze, his nickname for a sneeze that produced fire, so the book did not ignite. He did drop it, though, and just so happened to open up to a particular page. In a flash, Spike saw the words, Mare and the Moon, as the header. He picked it up eagerly, accidentally setting it in the process. I found it! In a flash, Spike found the book locked in Twilight's drummer Shimmer, his underbelly dragging along the blue-tiled floor as the caretaker pulled the book to her. By reflex, Spike let the book go, and he heard the muffled sounds of hardcovers of various sorts hitting the floor. Spike groaned internally. Ugh, guess who's on cleanup duty? He thought sullenly, as the surrogate mother started sifting through the book.
Aha! The Mare and the Moon, a.k.a. Shadow Mare, Nightmare Moon. I thought I read that name somewhere before. Twilight scratched her chin softly. Though, I don't think I knew Old Equus at the time I read this, so I dismissed the prophecy in question.
Why didn't they bother translating it to begin with? Spike asked, holding a stack of at least a dozen books.
The author notes that Forget-Me-Not, the prophet who made this prediction, specifically requested that it be transcribed exactly as he dictated, so that no meaning would be lost. I'll see if I can glean as much meaning from it into modern Equus.
Twilight squinted down at the faded Old Equus calligraphy. Ophir Fatigu Sculptural Gear.
Okay, so that's after 5 score years in modern Equus.
5 score years?
That means a megagross years, or a megarosum in our modern language. A score means 2,000.
So, you're... Spike counted on his claws from his precarious spot on top of the rolling ladder, having placed the books on back at the proper shelves. A score years old minus 2, Twilight?
Twilight nodded. That would be correct, Spike, she said curtly. Though, it's not polite to comment on a mare's age.
Sorry, Twilight. Twilight turned her back to a translation.
After 50 score years have passed, show... Twilight's nice arrowed at the next word. Niet Swin...
Niquin? Spike echoed, forgetting his task and walking to Twilight's side, looking down at the faded words.
I don't understand it either, Twilight muttered, and it's all in capital letters, which means that the crucial element of this prophecy. I know that Niet means night in modern Equus, and Schwen means queen. The Night Queen?
Spike set his claws. The Queen of the Night!
Twilight nodded. That makes sense. The Queen of the Night is... She stopped abruptly. Wait. Queen of the Night is the Alicorn who ruled along Queen Celestia when this diarchy was established, before becoming Nightmare Moon and being sealed to the moon for threatening to bring out eternal night.
What's so bad about that? Spike asked in an off-call fashion. Then you can sleep in as late as you want. I mean, sure, sundials would be useless, but... No, Spike!
Twilight almost shouted, her ears going flat against her head, actually kneeling down and almost pressing her nose to Spike's.
Young Drake took an involuntary step back.
Everlasting night would have catastrophic consequences for everyone on the planet. The climate would become colder than Tatara's deepest circle. Snow and hail would be all the participation we would ever know. Rivers and lakes would freeze. Crops would die without the sun.
Twilight's purple eyes twitched over the aggravated cactus out the window, thus barely visible from her position.
In short, the world would be thrown into ruin. That's not even considering the everlasting day the other half of the planet would be forced to endure.
Okay, I get it. Spike waved his forelimbs almost defensively. Unending night equals bad news, but it's alright, isn't it? I mean, you said it yourself. Queen of the Night is sealed in the moon.
We haven't finished reading this prophecy, though, Spike,
Twilight pointed out, returning to the desk he placed the tome upon. Her eyes darted back and forth across the lines of Old Equus, apparently translating her to herself in silence. Spike found himself becoming very edgy, watching Twilight reading so quietly. He wished he knew what was going on in Twilight's head, but he knew it couldn't be good. She was becoming increasingly horror-struck as he read further and further down the prophecy. Finally, after an eternity of silence, Twilight's Alicorn lit up, and her drummer shimmer closed the book.
Mom?
Spike asked nervously.
Spike, this is worse than anything we could have imagined,
she said lowly. She turned to face her Drake Ward. Her round pupils were narrowed to points, and her face looked pale.
What?
Spike asked. If Twilight did not automatically correct his addressing of her as Mom, it must have been truly, really, very bad.
I just translated the whole prophecy, and I wish that I hadn't. We, and when I say that, I don't mean just you and I mean the whole wide world of Harmonia, are in great deal of trouble.
What did the prophecy say? Spike asked fearfully. Twilight opened her mouth and recited her translation of the ancient prophecy.
After 5 score years have passed, since the Queen of the Night's interment, the stars will undo her shackles on the longest day of the year, and she will descend from her celestial cell and darken the sun, and turn the moon to blood. Unless she is cleansed by the 6 Glimmercrafts, she will bring nighttime eternal, and all life will perish. Twilight's legs shook as she collapsed onto her belly. Her ears drooped, and her tail swooped to her left side. Spike trotted up slowly to Twilight, reaching his right foreleg towards her. "What are the 6 Glimmercrafts?" Spike questioned. "I think it means the elements of harmony," Twilight said. "The force that sealed Nightmare Moon in the moon to begin with. But I don't know where they are, or how they work, or even what they might do." "What are we going to do?" Spike asked feebly, nuzzling into the voluminous tuft at the end of Twilight's tail, colored and styled just like her mane. "No pony alive today was there once he was beaten before. Actually, there is Spike," Twilight said, and Spike looked up and was astonished to see Twilight smiling. "Who?" Twilight jumped up to her hooves, and Spike was flung into the air, landing on her back as he paced around the hourglass centerpiece. "Who else, Spike, but Queen Celestia herself?" Twilight said brightly. "She's beaten Nightmare Moon before. I just need to tell her that Nightmare Moon is coming back, and she should be able to put down the Queen of the Night once and for all." She dug in her foothoofs and bucked her hips upwards, sending Spike into the air. To his credit, she'd done this many times before, and he had long since worked out how to land safely. "Take a note for the Queen, Spike," she said brightly. "Are you sure, Twilight?" said Spike, producing a quill and scroll from the desk drawer. "I mean, she's pretty busy right now as it is. I mean, today's the 2nd of Solace. The day after tomorrow is the Summer Sun celebration. And she's got to be pretty busy with—" "This is more important than the Summer Sun celebration, Spike," Twilight shouted. "Didn't you hear the prophecy? It said that the Queen of the Night, Nightmare Moon, would escape her imprisonment on the longest day of the year, a millennium after her banishment. This will be the mega gross of Summer Sun celebration since then. The mega gross of Summer Solstice. It is absolutely imperative that the Queen be informed right away." Spike saluted, taking care not to stab himself with the quill. "Okie dokie, Mom! Twilight!" He put the quill to the scroll. Twilight dictated exactly what she wanted Spike to write to Queen Celestia. And though Spike needed to be told how to spell certain words, more complicated than normal, he wrote down what she said masterfully. She had considered, and quickly dismissed, the idea of calling Her Highness's history of Nightmare Moon, but she had no idea what relationship they had before the banishment, only that they were very close. Twilight had no idea if they were friends, soulmates, wives, or even sisters. Her letter to the Queen was as follows. "Dear Queen Celestia, I have come upon an unsettling prophecy that indicates that we, Equestria, nay, Harmonia, stand upon the very precipice of disaster. This prophecy, told by the late Forget-Me-Not, indicates that the Queen of the Night, who we can only assume is a reference to Nightmare Moon, will return on the longest day of the mega gross of year since her banishment, and bring forth nighttime eternal if she is not stopped. Something must be done to assure that this prophecy does not come true. I await your quick reply. Your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle." Twilight then took the parchment and quill in her Dreamer Shimmer, once that she had been sure Spike was finished transcribing, and added her signature before rolling up the parchment and sealing it with the seal of the House of Twilight. She then returned the parchment to Spike's claws. "Now send it." Spike hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and exhaled his fire again. This time, though, the parchment did not ignite. Instead, it glowed with bright yellow sparkles and seemed to disappear into the fire, which became a trail of bright green smoke, which flew out the window and out of sight. "So, Twilight," Spike said awkwardly. He crossed his forelimbs behind his back, kicking at nothing with one of his hind claws. "Don't you want to sit down, have something to eat? I mean, it's not like she's going to reply right..." For the 3rd time that day, Spike found himself interrupted. But for the first time, it was not Twilight. Rather, Spike had interrupted himself with a loud belch, which produced a bright green cloud of smoke that coalesced into a regal white scroll, bound with a red ribbon and a seal showing half of the radiant sun and half a crescent moon. "There!" Twilight said simply, with a faint hint of a smug smile. "I knew that Queen Celestia would trust my judgment and take prompt action." Meanwhile, Spike had unfurled the scroll. "I never did understand why Queen Celestia wrote her little s's so weird," he muttered. "The long S, also known as the medial S or descending S, Was retired 2 gross years ago because too many ponies kept mistaking it for lowercase s," explained Twilight. "And Queen Celestia is very old. Old habits die old. Now, if you would kindly proceed." "Oh, right," Spike said, and just before he cleared his throat and began to read Celestia's missive. "Ahem. My dearest and most faithful student, Twilight Sparkle," he began. "You know that I value your diligence, and that I trust you completely." Twilight nodded approvingly. This was going swimmingly. She had successfully nipped this potential cataclysm in the bud. The Queen would commend her for her timely discovery, and utilized the power of the elements of harmony to finish the job she started a megarosum ago. Whereupon she would grant Twilight Sparkle access to even more complicated tones of magic, and bestow upon her even more intricate feats of thaumaturgy to practice them she was already adept at, and she would return to her parents to their normal pony forms. And everything would be just fine, and my head Spike stopped reading. Twilight cleared her throat. "Ahem. Go on, Spike," she said, her smile betrayed by the shadow of impatience in her tone. Spike glanced at Twilight nervously, before flipping the Queen's parchment around, so Twilight could see 10 little words that Her Majesty had written that put a throb in Spike's throat. "But you simply must stop reading those dusty old books." Twilight was seething. She was, as the Pegasus saying went, on cloud 9, and then Queen Celestia of all ponies yanked out the rug from under her. Yesterday, she thought she would be spending this day learning the absolute deepest secrets of magic from the Queen as a reward for cutting Nightmare Moon's revenge short. But instead, she found herself in a chariot being pulled by 2 Pegasus royal guards, with her parents the aggravated Cactus, and Spike rereading the letter. "My dearest Twilight, there is more to a pony's life than studying," he read. "So, I'm sending you to this year's location for the Summer Sun celebration, Ponyville." The chariot ride would not be very long. Ponyville was the very same hamlet in Saddle Valley, which rested on the edge of the dreaded Everfree Forest. Twilight knew very little about it, only that it was established by Earth ponies within the past gross years, that it had a population of barely 3 gross, and that it had developed an affinity for ponies of mixed blood. It was not uncommon anymore for the 3 ponies races to mix. So there could be Earth ponies and Pegasi, who had leonine tails or cloven hooves and unshorn fetlocks of unicorns. Or Earth ponies and unicorns with the feathered fetlocks and chest feathers of Pegasi. Or unicorns and Pegasi, who had the short fetlocks of most Earth ponies. Though they had these mixed physical attributes, though, no pony ever inherited the magic of any of the 3 races, save the race they were born as. Each pony of mixed race was just as capable as any other full-blooded pony of his or her race. Only Queen Celestia bore the physical attributes and magical abilities of all 3 pony races. As far as Twilight was concerned, though, being relocated to this hamlet was a severe blunder for her mentor. She held the key to preventing nighttime eternal falling upon Harmonia, and the Queen saw fit to positioning her right within the very epicenter of the problem. Spike continued to read. "And I have an even more essential task for you to complete." The 3 final words, apart from the Queen's loopy signature, were written in surprisingly bold font and underlined 3 times. "Make some friends!" Twilight groaned. Why was it that every pony was now trying to push her into having social interaction? Getting to know ponies, letting them into her heart, was only ever the path to pain and heartbreak. Books were a more reliable tool to get through life by far. At least, there was no ambiguity there. Spike rolled up the Queen's scroll and resealed. He put a claw to her shoulder. "Oh, come on, Twilight, chin up! Look at the bright side. The Queen arranged for you to stay at Ponyville's library, the Golden Oak. Doesn't that make you happy?" Twilight was quiet for several more moments. Then she perked up, her ears sticking straight into the air. They were coming in for a landing in the main square of Ponyville, right beside the town hall, known locally as the gazebo. She could make out indivisible thatched roofs by this point, and a few cloud houses for the few all-Pegasi families that called Ponyville home. "Yes! As a matter of fact, I am. You know why? Because I'm right. I'll be sure to find a book out there that'll back me up in reaffirming Nightmare Moon's return, and the proof is in the printed pudding." So, When are you going to make friends, like the Queen said you should? Twilight scoffed. Come on, Spike. Friends? Please. She told me to supervise the preparations for the Summer Sun celebration, and that's just what I'll do. As soon as I'm finished, I'll head straight back to the library, find some additional proof of Nightmare Moon's return, and inform the Queen of it right away. The fate of the world can't possibly rest on me making friends. But you're sure you'll find something important here? I mean, Ponyville's pretty much the sticks, isn't it? Can't get much stickier than this, Twilight droned as the chariot made landfall. The pair of Pegasus Royal Guards slowing their mid-air gallops to a canter, then a trot, then rearing up with mutual whinnies as they came to a stop. Twilight disembarked, as did Spike. The pair of them staggered slightly. They both lost some of their sense of balance on solid land somewhere in the flight. Thank you, kind sirs, Twilight said to the nearest Royal Guard.
Think nothing of it, Lady Twilight,
said the alabaster stallion.
Shall I take your place to the Golden Oak Library?
Yes, please, Twilight said, raising a hope of concern. And do be careful with them, would you kindly? I'm taking very good care of them while I study how to fix them. The stallions glanced at each other in confusion, not quite aware of Twilight's checkered history of control of her own magic. After a moment, the pair of them shrugged and galloped up in the direction of the library. Well, now to get to that Summer Sun celebration we're overseeing with, Twilight said flatly, walking in the opposite direction from the chariot. She kept glancing back, as if she were afraid they would blink out of existence the moment she looked out of the way. Come on, Twilight, said Spike, who produced the Overseer's checklist. You gotta keep on high spirits. Try to make some small talk on the way. I mean, it's not like Ponyville's ponies have nothing interesting to talk about, right? Spike glanced about. His eyes settled on one particular mare, cantering with a bounce in her step. Why don't you talking to her, Twilight? She had a pale pink coat of fur, and a brilliant deep pink mane and tail that looked both impossibly fuzzy and poofy. She had very vibrant cerulean eyes, and her cutie mark was a baby yellow balloon with a baby blue string, flanked by two baby blue balloons with baby yellow strings. She had an aura of seeming perpetual energy about her, as though she was absolutely the happiest mare in the world, and wanted to share that joy with every pony. As she got closer, Twilight could see that this mare had bright pink feathers matching her mane and tail color around her fetlocks and chest. She had a Pegasus at least 2 generations back in her bloodline. Come on, Twilight, Spike said with a degree of impatience. The pink mare was about to pass them by. Just try! Against her better judgment, Twilight could see it. Hello? The result was completely unexpected. The mare turned at the sound of the hello, and the instant that the O in hello had finished being said, seemed to float up in the air as some unearthly sound escaped her throat. Twilight only just registered that sound as an exaggerated gasp before the pink earth pony mare seemed to dart off through the thoroughfare in mid-air. Well, that was interesting, Twilight said, blinking at the yellow flash down the street as the pink pony left her sight. I might even say that pony was special. Ugh. Spike could only sigh. This was going to take a while. Well, will you look at that? Pinkie Pie's kitty mark. Her yellow balloon really does have a blue string. Huh. I never noticed that before. Then again, I guess it's because Pinkie Pie moves so quickly that I never noticed the strings are her cutie mark. That's a cool new fact. Okay, said Spike, clearing his throat, as he read the Overseer's checklist again. The first stop on the Overseer's checklist was of the banquet preparations. Granted, the banquet would not unfold until after sunrise the next day, but a sampling of the wares that would be provided was necessary. So, if the food turns out to be bad, Twilight thought, every pony will need to rush to find a suitable replacement. This food might very well be eaten by the Queen, if Nightmare Moon hadn't stuffed her out the sun by then. The trek to the location of the banquet preparations actually took them out of Ponyville, rather uncomfortably close to the Everfree. What Twilight had taken to be a rather gutsy home placement within the edge of the forest was actually a large grove of apple trees, along with a barn that seemed to pull double duty as a farmhouse. Past Twilight and Spike trotted down to a shoulder-height fence, broken by a gateway with a sign emblazoned with large engraved apple and the phrase, Sweet Apple Acres, established 2461 ER. Sweet Apple Acres, Twilight read aloud. Might as well find the banquet preparations. She had barely crossed the threshold before almost being bowled over by a great orange boar shouting, Yee-haw! Which then made contact with one of the apple trees. Each and every apple in the branches fell down into carefully placed baskets that Twilight just noticed around the trunk. Now that the boar had stopped, Twilight made out a towering mare with a long blonde mane and tail, both of which were tied off at ends with red hairbands. She was wearing a worn, leathery Stetson. Her legs ended in long, blonde fetlocks. She had to have some draft horse in her blood, and her right legs were currently crossed in front of the left ones. Her cutie mark was a set of 3 vibrant red apples. She was very large, the largest mare that Twilight had ever seen, and she was powerfully built too, with muscles rippling under her coat. Twilight winced a little at the sight of jaw-shaped scars across the apple mare's back. What sort of monsters from the Everfree tried to attack Sweet Apple Acres? But Twilight cleared her throat to get this mare's attention, hoping that this mare was not aggravant. She didn't want to be split in half on the eve of the Summer Sun celebration, and this mare looked capable of it. Good afternoon, she stammered, bowing and closing her eyes. My name is Twilight Sparkle. Twilight felt like her right foreleg was about to be ripped out, and she wondered how she offended this powerful mare. But she opened her eyes and saw that the apple mare was smiling a very irrelevant smile, and shaking her forehoof very vigorously, with both of her own hooves. From the front, so you could see that this mare had deep emerald eyes, many white freckles across her cheeks and muzzle, and 2 deep scars running along the bridge of her nose. Well, how do you do there, Miss Twilight Sparkle? She said, and she had a powerful country twang. Pleased to make your acquaintance. My name's Applejack. We apples sure do love making new friends. Friends? Twilight said, her voice shaking because she just kept on shaking and shaking and shaking and shaking and shaking. Actually, Applejack winked one of those emerald eyes. So, what can I do you for? Twilight realized that this Applejack had just let go of her foreleg and was stuck pointing straight ahead because of the muscle strain. Smiling nervously and ignoring Spike's snickering, Twilight brought her own leg down with her left. She'd be feeling sore in that leg during the summer celebration. We're Applejack, Twilight began. You see, I am the pupil of Queen Celestia, and I've been sent here to supervise the food preparation. You got the Queen's letter and notice, I take it? Yep. We sure are so good like it, Applejack said brightly. Now, would you care to sample some vittles? Although Twilight had grown amidst the high class of Canterlot, she had no fear or disdain for the so-called rabble. Granted, she did not understand some of their slang when she saw some settling their wares in Canterlot, but that was because she'd never read a book on slang. Well, as long as it didn't take too long, I had to be back at the Golden Library before sundown and... No sweat there, Sugar Cramp, Applejack said. Twilight couldn't help but bless a little bit at the pet name. Last I'll take, the family just finished working out the practice bites. I'll call her out now. So he kicked a large frying pan hanging from a nearby post, which let out a deafening clang that forced Twilight's ears against her skull. Applejack bellowed joyfully, The Everslayer's here, everybody! And Twilight Spike found himself swamped up in a stampeding herd that seemed to come out of nowhere. Once she regained her bearings and found herself at a rectangular wooden table set out on a plain patch, surrounded by trees. A herd of scores of ponies, mostly earth ponies of all sorts of colors and all sorts of ages, stood in a circle around her. They all had the same irreverent smile. I'd like to introduce you to my family, the Apples. Twilight laughed nervously. That will be necessary. And then Applejack named each apple in turn, and as each apple was named, she or he bolted up to Twilight, placed the food dish on the table in front of her, then returned to his or her previous spot. Twilight could not help but notice that each apple had baked an apple-based treat based off of his or her name. Apple tart, apple strudel, apple brioche, apple cinnamon crisp, apple fritter, apple pumpkin. Some of them were named after apples themselves, like Red Gala, Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, Brilliant Seedling, Brayburn. Some of them were barely apple-related, like Mosley Orange and Vanessa Orange, and their Eldritch Sunflower. a Pegasus, and Ballrat Sealing's young elder sister. But Twilight would not have been able to recall any names or faces afterwards, as she did not have an eidetic memory. She never forgot anything. Ever. And after reciting a half-dozen names, Applejack finally took a breath. "And lastly, meet my kin," she said. A direct red stallion, with a bright orange mane and short tail, and a green apple cutie mark approached. He was even bigger than Applejack, and looked just as scarred. He too had white freckles across his muzzle. His fetlocks were a shaggy dark red, and he wore a hitch collar. His green eyes were the same as his sister's. "My big brother, Big Mike Toss. We call him Big Mike for short. He's a strong sound type. Alicia, Big Mike." "Yup," said Big Macintosh. His voice was deep and resonant, and held Applejack's same farm accent. Applejack smiled lovingly at her brother, before a little filly galloped into the closing circle on her tiny legs. She had a bright yellow coat, bouncy red mane and tail the same color as her brother's coat, bright red freckles across the bridge of her nose, and a large pink bow tied into her mane that even Twilight had to admit was adorable. Her left hind leg had a different color, sugary white, with the same furry fetlock as her big sister, and she had a bright peach-colored eyes that sparkled with a vivid vigor that only came from youth. She had no cutie mark, which meant that she likely had not found her special talent yet. "My little sister, Apple Bloom. She's a right little sprout straight out of heaven, if you ask any pulling in Ponyville or the Apple family." "Applejack!" Apple Bloom whined, kicking a tiny little four-legged Applejack, though Applejack's size meant that she barely reached her big sister's elbow. Twilight giggled to herself, a hoof over her mouth. Spike dug an elbow into her side. "Watch out! Some pony's having fun!" Spike said in a sing-song voice, which turned him a glare. "And last but not least, in the slightest, the matriarch of the whole Apple family, Granny Smith." Into the circle trotted an elderly mare with a pale green coat color, and a green mane and tail both done into buns. Trotted being a relative term, she looked positively ancient. If Twilight didn't know any better, she would have wagered that this Granny Smith was at the very founding of Ponyville. She had the same peach-colored eyes as Apple Bloom, and an apple pie cutie mark. She wore an orange neckerchief speckled with red apples. "Eek! Let you shout there, Ranger! I can hear you just fine without my hair trumpet!" Granny Smith snapped, though there was a bit of a playful edge to her tone. Applejack laughed. Deep, hearty laugh that suited her. "I gotcha, Granny Smith. I gotcha." Twilight, who started off by eating an apple fritter at the moment, suddenly felt like every apple was training their eyes upon her. It really was delicious, and Queen Celestia had always had a preference for simpler foodwares, despite the elitist attitudes of the high-class ponies who surrounded her. Twilight nodded her approval. The apples cheered. "Well, how about it? Looks like we got ourselves another apple, folks. She's part of the family already." As the apples let out a collective "Yee-haw!" Twilight spat out her second bite of apple fritter in shock. This was going too fast. She was here to supervise the summer celebration wares. They had to further research Nightmare Moon's return, not to do social interaction. She had to get out of here, and quick. "Well, I can see that the food situation is taken care of, so I think I really better go." "Aren't you gonna stay for brunch?" Apple Bloom said meekly, her bottom lip quivering as her ears drooped. "I thought I got another big sister." Twilight's heart ached. "Sorry," she said, trying not to feel too conflicted about leaving, "but I have a lot of activities to supervise before the day is out." The Apple family, to their credit, was not an angry sort. The whole of the family prided themselves on their closeness to one another. It was almost an Apple family motto to say that one was an apple to the core. Even the oranges did not sever all ties to the family. When they heard that Queen Celestia herself would be at the Summer Sun celebration, they came with full speed to help with the proceedings. The collective Apple family let out a disapproved sigh. In the face of such sunken spirits, Twilight felt absolutely wretched. Though she feared she would regret it, she only had one word to say. "Fine." For the third time, the apples cheered. "Ugh, I ate too much pie." Twilight felt like she was going to explode. She had never eaten so much food in her life. She had to have eaten at least a week's worth of food of all sorts in the span of a single brunch. She couldn't refuse any food offered to her, or she'd feel like she let the apple family down. There were so many different types of apple-based foods she had not heard of before, and many she was positive did not exist until that morning. It was all delicious, but it was just all too much. Twilight had only hoped that no pony offered her so much as a wafer-thin mint before the day was out. Oh, what's next on the list? Twilight sighed, hoping that it was nothing too taxing to her gastrointestinal system. Spike overlooked the overseer's checklist. Looks like the weather. There's supposed to be a Pegasus mare named Rainbow Dash somewhere in the clouds. Twilight and Spike looked up at the noon sky. Though the sky was somewhat clear, it was only somewhat clear. There were clouds dotted here and there overhead. There was apparently no wind scheduled for today by the local weather team, so the clouds remained stationary. Twilight scoffed. Well, doesn't look like she's done a good job, does it? Splat! Twilight found herself face down in a puddle of mud. Her stomach was screaming in protest of the severe blows she'd taken to the gut, and she was quite sure she looked ridiculous with her tail pointed straight in the air. Something, or more specifically, some pony, had crashed into her. And it was not just some pony. It was a Pegasus. A Pegasus who was giving a light and irreverent laugh in a high and scratchy voice that grated in Twilight's ears. Excuse me, said the Pegasus, as Twilight turned herself over to get a good look at the crasher. It was a light blue Pegasus with a scruffy rainbow-colored mane. Red, orange, yellow across the top. Green, blue, purple at the back. Her tail progressed from purple, just below her tail feathers, to red, with a reverse rainbow. She had rainbow-colored fetlocks, chest feathers, and rainbow feathers over her tail. She was small, lean, and wiry, with a feral look to her. She had a cocky grin that revealed long fangs. One rainbow eye was cocked upwards towards her pink eyes. Her cutie mark was a cloud with a tricolored lightning bolt, red, yellow, and blue, protruding from the bottom. Twilight merely growled. This could only be... Let me help you with that, said the Rainbow Pegasus with a haughty snicker, and Twilight had a strong suspicion as to why. She was absolutely covered in mud by the crash. Before Twilight could say, I have no words, the Rainbow Pegasus was back with a spare rain cloud, placing it at a spot some 6 hooves over to prove Twilight's head. With a deceptively innocent smile, she jumped up onto the cloud, and pounced upon the cloud over and over, releasing a downpour onto Twilight. By the time it was finished, Twilight was clean of mud, but soaked to the bone, and absolutely incensed. Whoops! Guess I overdid it, huh? Of course you didn't, Twilight didn't say. I absolutely need to be more thoroughly drenched. So, how about this? Whatever it is, how about no? Just before she knew what was going on, Twilight found herself wrapped up in a rainbow-colored tornado. Just a little something I whipped up for special occasions! The tornado stopped, and the Rainbow Pegasus stopped on the spot, posing like some sort of superstar. My very own, patent-pending, rainbow dry! Oh no, don't need to thank me, you're quite well... Twilight knew exactly why her assailant stopped talking. After such thorough abuse, mud tackle, drenching downpour, and now being caught in a gale of a twister by an overzealous Pegasus, her mane and tail were both absolutely tangled and messy, her coat sticking straight out, making her look like a partial transfiguration of a pony porcupine. It seemed like this was too much for the rowdy Pegasus to bear, and she collapsed in a tearful laughing fit. There was something absolutely grating about the way she laughed, in a way that made her speaking voice sound positively cultured. Then Spike had to join Rainbow Dash in the laughter. Yes, there could be no pony else that this rainbow mare was. Let me guess. Your Rainbow Dash? Twilight murmured. In an instant, there was a significant change in the Pegasus mare. She went from lying on her back, 4 hooves on her belly as she guffawed at Twilight's ridiculous new mane style, to standing up with her wings unfurled fully, a 4-hoof on her chest. Spike coughed the last few lines out. The one and only, said Rainbow Dash, with every degree of arrogantness and self-assuredness that made Twilight want to hate the mare with all the intensity of the inferno of the Concord flame. Rainbow Dash flapped into the air, pressing her nose to Twilight's. Rainbow Dash's pupils were oval-shaped. Twilight noted. What? You heard me? Twilight engulfed Rainbow Dash in her Dwemer shimmer and levitated her away. Her breath smelled terrible. I'm Twilight Sparkle. I was sent by my teacher, Queen Celestia, to supervise preparations for the summer sun celebration. Twilight sighed, taking the forgotten overseer's checklist from Spike's side, using her Dwemer shimmer to point the quill at the words weather control. And I heard that you were supposed to be keeping the sky clear, so that every pony can see the sunrise clearly when the summer sun celebration begins tomorrow morning. Rainbow Dash waved a hoof dismissively. Yeah, I'll get on it. Just got finished practicing my sick moves. Sick moves like cover every pony in the mud by crashing straight into them? Hey, practice makes perfect. I gotta make sure I got all my maneuvers down pat for the Wonderbolts they're performing at the Summer Sun Celebration, and I'll show them my moves. Twilight cocked a dissatisfied eyebrow. The Wonderbolts? You seriously think that the most big-time group of most magically powerful Pegasi in all of Equestria, in all of Harmonia, are seriously going to consider letting a slacker like you join the force? Rainbow Dash grinned, showing off her canine and wool teeth. You seriously think I'm a slacker? You sure you didn't bump your head in the crash? Well, you might have hit hard, but you can't even keep the sky clear for one day. Rainbow Dash flapped up into the air, alighting upon the clouds to use to downpour Twilight. Spoiler alert, Twilight Sparkle! The Summer Sun celebrations tomorrow! Their performance is this time tomorrow, a whole 24 hours away. I've got time to clear the sky, and when I'll do it, I'll clear it in 10 seconds flat. Twilight decided to throw down her gauntlet, make this blustering Pegasus put her bits where her mouth was. Prove it. As soon as Twilight finished saying the word it and prove it, Rainbow Dash bolted into the sky, leaving a prismatic trail of light behind her, some artifact in her inborn Pegasus atmokinetic magic. Twilight's smugness immediately took a sharp plummet at Rainbow Dash's movements in the sky. Even some pony like Twilight, who now experienced flight, and no chance of having personal experience, being a unicorn, could tell that Rainbow Dash was a flight prodigy. She didn't waste a single movement, her wings and tail feathers angling her just the right amount to beeline straight at each cloud, then dispersing each one with a swift mid-air buck. And she was fast. Faster than any Pegasus that Twilight had ever seen. Faster than any she ever read about in any of her books. She wondered if even General Firefly, the very first Wonderbolt, would have been able to match Rainbow Dash's speed at a competition. Almost as soon as Rainbow Dash bucked one cloud, she was already beelining straight for another, as though she had a sixth sense for where every cloud in the sky was. She was almost too fast for Twilight's eyes to follow, and she literally seemed to cross from one side of Ponyville to the other in the blink of an eye. Before Twilight's brain caught up with her eyes, Rainbow Dash was sitting back on the clouds she started on, and she wasn't even sweating. She wasn't even out of breath. She was grinning down at Twilight again, her eyes sparkling with mirth. And the sky, as far as Twilight Sparkle could see, had not a single cloud anywhere over Saddle Valley. See? I wasn't pulling your leg, Twilight Sparkle! 10 seconds flat! It was indeed 10 seconds. Or close enough, if anything. Rainbow Dash had actually come under 10 seconds, if only by a doozy second or two. Rainbow Dash floated the cloud toward Twilight's eye level. Did you really think that I'm just some show pony who boasts faster than he flies? I'd never tell any pony that ain't so. Then Rainbow Dash started snickering again. This time, Twilight had no idea why. You should see the look on your face. And then Rainbow Dash started snickering again. And this time, Twilight had no idea why. You should see the look on your face. It was only when Twilight felt Spike grabbing her jaw, pushing her mouth shut, that she realized her jaw had dropped some point during that spectacle. You're a real laugh, you know that, T.S.? We should really hang out sometime. In a flash, Rainbow of Light, Rainbow Dash was already gone. Spike was gaping after the rainbow pony. Wasn't she amazing? He asked, looking up Twilight. He started biting his lip when he saw her mane. Twilight scowled. Come on! It looks nice when you get used to it. The next stop, as it turned out, was Town Hall itself, where the opening ceremony of the Summer Sun Celebration would unfold. Retrospectively, They probably should have made this the first stop on their trip. But the past was the past. No point fussing over should have beens. A unicorn mare, rarity of carousel couture, was cited as being the pony responsible for this third stop of the overseer's checklist. Decorations. Upon entering the hall, Twilight could see why this place was chosen for the opening ceremony. The double doors leading into town hall was on the west side of the building, and the atrium had a large window facing to the east, so sunrise could always be seen to any pony entering through the front doors. It was an ideal locale for the celebration of the longest day of the year. She heard Spike gasp at her side. Beautiful. She could only agree. Twilight was no connoisseur of decor, but the curtains and ribbons and drapes and such were all so well displaced that she had to find Rarity and offer her sincere compliments to the mare in question. After the exhausting meeting with Applejack and her family of apples, and the frustrating encounter with Rainbow Dash, she only hoped that she could make it through this meeting unscathed. For the moment, Twilight merely nodded, soaking in the details all around her. I agree. The decorations are very lovely, Spike. Not the decor. Her. Twilight looked down at her young dragon companion, and she was gazing dreamily at the podium at the head of the atrium, a claw pointing in the same direction. His grip on this overseer's checklist and quill were both slack. There, up behind the podium, below a balcony, flanked by a pair of regal curtains respectively decorated with the sun and moon, adjusting some ribbons and bows in her periwinkle glimmer shimmer, was a slender unicorn mare who could only be Rarity. She had a sleek alabaster coat, with not a single hair out of place. Her mane and the skirt at the end of her tail were a rich, deep purple, curled in thin spirals at the ends. Her cutie mark was 3 pale blue diamonds. Her almond-shaped eyes were azure, framed by very prominent eyelashes. Curiously, for a unicorn, her fetlocks were almost non-existent. Perhaps she had an earth pony in her immediate heritage. Immediately, Spike dropped a quill and parchment and got to work adjusting his frills and spines. Twilight, tell me! Are my spines straight? Do I look good? Do I? Twilight rolled her eyes and approached the podium. Good afternoon. Ha! Said Rarity, not even looking the way of her addressee. She spoke with a refined, cultured accent that Twilight could only assume was put on out here in Ponyville. Just a moment, if you will. I am, as the common phrase goes, in the zone. Rarity caught the Navigator's eyebrow, looking penitently at one of the particular bow tied around a support beam. After a moment, she closed her eyes, revealing pale blue eyeshadow, and her horn-flashed periwinkle, blinking the spots out of her eyes. Twilight saw that all the decorations around Town Hall were sparkling, as though each ribbon and bow were studded with 1,000,000 diamonds. Ah, yes! Rarity said triumphantly. Sparkles always do the trick. Why, Rarity Belle, you are a talent. Now, how can I help you? Rarity began to turn to Twilight. Her query quickly degenerated into a sonnet cry. Good heavens, darling! Whatever happened to your coiffure? With a start, Twilight realized she had not tidied her mane since the less than pleasant encounter with Rainbow Dash. It's a long story, she said flatly, hoping she did not come across as too cross. She tried to lighten her mane as she continued. But I'm just here to check out the decorations. It all looks to be in order, so I'll just get out of your hair now and... My hair? What about your hair? Cried Rarity, diving down from the podium to Twilight's side. She began to butt her head into Twilight's side, pushing her yellow unicorn toward the main doors. Spike followed dreamily. Twilight hastily shimmered the overseer's checklist and quill to her side. Where are you taking me? Asked the fastened mare. I'm taking you to my boutique, Carousel Couture, for a makeover. I simply cannot allow such travesty to befall such lovely main colors in my presence. No, really, it's all right. I can fix it myself, Twilight said hastily, trying to flatten her mane with her full hoof. It refused to cooperate. Oh, no, dear, Reggie said emphatically. If it's price to worry about, put those worries aside. This one's on the house. I will simply have you looking more beautiful than you've ever been. Carousel Couture was a circular building, shaped and decorated like an upscale circus tent. Above the canopy front door was the symbol of a carousel horse, and a pair of carousel mannequins circled around the top story. It almost looked like it did not belong to Ponyville, with how high and cultured in appearance it presented. Twilight had little time to absorb every detail before she was shoved through the door by a surprisingly forceful Rarity. Inside, Twilight found her mane and tail were sorted without in the first 20 minutes. But for the remaining 3/4 of the hour, Rarity had expanded it on several more mane styles. And for the next several hours, Rarity pulled a veritable cornucopia of dresses of all manner of styles to test upon Twilight. During this high-speed fitting session with no end in sight, Twilight observed the workroom of Carousel Couture. The uttermost host length of the workroom's circumference was devoted to a circle of mannequins fitted onto poles that actually rotated about the room like a carousel, as Rarity's dimmer shimmer glimmered. Each mannequin was fitted with a dress of some sort. There were mirrors and screens for changing into dresses, and observing one's attire. There was another door that led away from the workroom to some other room Twilight was oblivious to the purpose of, though it was possible Rarity lived here. Any attempts to get Spike's attention were curtailed by his obvious infatuation with Rarity. Finally, after what seemed like forever, Rarity found a dress that seemed to think suited to Twilight well. Twilight had to admit she looked quite stylish in it, though the bridle was perhaps a little flowery to her taste. The emerald in her chest might have been pushing it as well.
"Now, do go on, my dear,"
Rarity said, taking the corset's laces in her glimmer shimmer.
"Where did you say you were from?"
"I didn't," Twilight said, aghast startling as Rarity tightened the corset.
"I
was sent for Canterlot to—" Rarity released the corset laces abruptly, and Twilight fell onto her chest as Rarity began to canter gaily about Twilight.
Did you say Canterlot? Such a truly lovely locale! The glamour, the sophistication! Oh, I've always dreamed of living there!"
Twilight picked herself off the ground, just as Rarity cantered right up to her and nuzzled him. Twilight flushed at such a closeness of another pony.
"I can already tell that you and I will be the best of friends!"
Again with the whole friend deal! And she's a social climber by the looks of it. From the start, Rarity glowered the emerald into Twilight's dress.
"Emerald? What was I thinking? Let's get you a ruby!"
That was it. She wasted enough time here at Carousel Couture. She needed to leave, now, before Rarity decided to dye her coat a new color or something. As soon as Rarity closed the door out the workroom, Twilight caught Spike in her glimmer shimmer and galloped out the front door, leaving the dress behind. Spike sighed from his spot on Twilight's back.
"Oh, wasn't she just wonderful?"
Twilight gave him a weary smile. Carousel Couture was far behind him, and Rarity was the last thing that Twilight wanted in her mind.
"Focus, Casanova! We still got one last thing to check off the checklist, and that is—"
Spike shook his head back and forth, smacking his cheeks with his claws, clearing his throat as he stood on Twilight's back with the parchment.
"The last thing on the checklist is music! It should be a chorus of birds being conducted by a Pegasus mare named—"
Twilight saw Spike. She thought she heard something. Her ears twitched as she listened in for whatever she thought she heard. After a moment or two of attention, she heard it. Faint, a minute's further walk out of Ponyville, was the sound of a menagerie of birds, chirping, whistling, twittering, cheeping in sequence. It was some of the most lovely music that Twilight had ever heard, and she was getting closer to it. With a bright smile, Twilight cantered down the road toward the source of the bird chorus. Within a minute, Twilight reached a small tree, each branch seeded with every manner of birds you could imagine. Robins, bluebirds, pigeons, canaries, doves, cockatiels, cuckoos, macaws. The sound they were making was just so magical. But one of the bluebirds seemed just a bit off. Spike slid off Twilight's back, hiding behind a nearby bush so it would not frighten off the birds. A dragon was more off-putting than a pony to a bunch of birds. In an instant, Twilight heard the soft chirping of a bird she'd never heard before. She imagined some lovely, angelic swan of a dove making this sweet exit to his orchestra, but the birds stopped singing. In swept from the top of the tree, behind Twilight, a butter-yellow Pegasus mare with long, slender legs, a long, slender neck, and a sweeping pink mane and tail. She had the modest fetlocks and chest fur of an earth pony. Was a parent of hers an earth pony? And her cutie mark was of 3 pink butterflies. Astonishingly to Twilight, despite her small, lithe build, this Pegasus had a startling number of scars and bite marks along her deer-like body, more so than even Applejack had. And this yellow mare was the one who was chirping. She could talk to birds. She was talking to the one bluebird whose tempo was off. Was she informing of his mistake? She seemed to be, as it was nodding slowly. She slapped back, chirped a couple more times. Then, in a soft, sweet voice,
A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3.
"Hello," Twilight ventured before she could help herself. Maybe it was the approachability of this mare, compared to the extreme personalities of the other ponies she'd seen so far today. Maybe she was emboldened by the glorious chorus of birds she had been privy to. In either case, the word hello was out of her mouth before her brain caught up to what she was doing. In a split second, the birds scattered to all manners of different trees, and the yellow mare gasped sharply before fluttering to the ground before Twilight, hiding her face behind her mane. I'm sorry I scared your birds off," Twilight said awkwardly. "I mean, it sounded beautiful, and all that. I had to say something." Twilight offered a smile that she hoped was enduring, even comforting, but the yellow Pegasus mare withdrew even further behind her mane. After another moment of her awkward silence, Twilight held out a hoof. "I'm Twilight Sparkle. What's your name?" Glancing out behind her rosy curtain of a mane, the withdrawn Pegasus mare looked at Twilight with a sighing eye.
I'm Fluttershy.
"I'm sorry, what was that?" Twilight asked, taking a step forward. The side Pegasus mare took 2 steps back.
My name is Fluttershy.
Twilight smiled ingratiatingly, though she was inwardly starting to find this mare aggravatingly quiet. "Didn't quite catch that either."
Fluttershy.
The Pegasus mare whimpered. Twilight cast her eyes about, looking for some topic, anything this resistant Pegasus name. It seemed to be a real challenge to dig out. "Well, it looks like your birds are back now," she said brightly, pointing up to a tree over the yellow pony's shoulder, where many of the birds started to perch back on the branches. "So I guess you guys can get back to practice? Keep up the good work?" But with each successive word, Twilight's conversation partner retreated further and further back, receding more and more behind her own mane. "Okay," Twilight said, turning back to face Spike, who had emerged from behind a bush, shrugging. "Well, that was a riveting conversation." Twilight heard a very loud gasp. For a moment, she thought the pink earth pony from that morning had followed her here. But when she heard the delighted cry of a
Baby dragon.
she realized it was the pony she had been trying to talk to this whole time. She nearly bowled Twilight over, trying to meet Spike face to face.
I've never seen a baby dragon before. He's so cute.
Spike glanced over his shoulder at Twilight, who was staring at the Pegasus in alarm. Well. All that talk, and it does take a little bit of dragon accent."
Oh my.
The Pegasus gasped.
I didn't know dragons could talk.
She fluttered into the air again, her eyes closed in glee.
This is so incredible. I don't know what to say.
"Well, that's a real big surprise and a real shame," Twilight said, shimmer flinging Spike onto her back, "because we really need to get to the Golden Oak Library. Now!"
But wait,
cried the yellow Pegasus.
I want to know his name.
"Sure thing," Spike said smilingly. "My name is Spike."
Hello, Spike.
The Pegasus said softly.
My name is Fluttershy. I take care of all the critters around Ponyville, settle disputes between the rabble and jackalope warrens, and make sure beaver dams don't block off streams at Ashley and Apple Acres in... Oh, a talking dragon. I still can't get over it. What do dragons talk about?
"Well, what do you want me to talk about?"
Absolutely everything.
Fluttershy said brightly. Twilight groaned. This was going to be a long walk, having to listen to every single detail of Spike's life, which she herself was already privy to. "Well, I started out as a cute little purple egg. And that's the story of my whole life," Spike finished. Sunset had come and gone, and the sky was a deep royal purple at dusk, before the deep blue black of night. "Well, except for today. Would you like to hear about today?"
Oh, yes, of course.
said Fluttershy happily, rearing up at the thought.
Whatever brought you to the Ponyville?
"I'm sorry to have wasted your time," Twilight said curtly, "but we've got to get to where I'm going to be staying here in Ponyville for the night." It was the Golden Oak Library, known locally to some ponies as the Tree of Knowledge, a large tree that had been standing since before Ponyville's founding, if the placard by the door was to be believed, had since been hollowed out and made into a well-stocked library, along with living quarters for whatever lucky librarian happened to call the Golden Oak Library home. The leaves on its branches had been enchanted to retain their color, depending on the season. Now that was a really riveting conversation, Twilight said in a falsely cheery voice. But my little dragon here is all tuckered out and needs his rest for tomorrow. Nuh-uh, Spike said, folding his arm. I'm not the least bit. Whoa! Twilight had, she hoped, nonchalantly bucked Spike off her back and onto the ground. She kneeled down over him, giving him a pitying look, and said in a baby's voice,
"Aw, look at that! He's so sleepy he can hardly keep his little balance." "Oh, you poor dear,"
said Fluttershy, sleeping Spike up into her forelegs and fluttering through the door of Golden Oak Library.
"We simply must get you to bed."
Twilight deftly slipped past Fluttershy, Twimmer shivering Spike out of the Pegasus' hooves, and none too gently pushed the Pegasus out the door. Yeah, I'll get right on it. He's my little dragon. Good night.
Slam!
Twilight slammed the door on Fluttershy, leaving herself and Spike in pitch blackness. Twilight frowned at this. She expected some pony to be in Golden Oak Library to show her living quarters, or at least for the window shade to be open and let in some of the last light of Celestia's sun to shine in when she showed up. Dismissing this, she faced Spike, whose eyes she could make out even in the dimness. He was frowning. Well, rude much? Sorry, Spike, but I have to convince Queen Celestia that Nightmare Moon is coming, and we're running out of time. It's 6 in the evening, and we have less than a dozen hours till dawn tomorrow, when Nightmare Moon will surely return. I need to be alone so I can study without a bunch of crazy ponies trying to make friends all the time. She glanced around. Ponyville had become so increasingly sparse as the day progressed. She couldn't help but get an ominous feeling in the deep of her belly about it. Maybe it was just paranoia at the impending return of a dark abomination from the past. But she still had to wonder. And for that matter, where's that light? In a flash, the lights came on, and Twilight was blind for a second or two. When her vision cleared, she saw that the library was packed full of almost all the ponies of Ponyville. She could barely make out the bookshelves behind the rows of ponies of different sizes, shapes, colors, and races. Some Pegasi flew, some walked, but all of the ponies in the room threw confetti into the air and set off pony favors to let out surprisingly loud pops as the ponies all shouted, "Surprise!" Suddenly, Twilight caught a whiff of cotton candy and found her cheeks being squeezed together by a pair of hooves that definitely seemed to be wearing rubber horseshoes and had no sense of personal space. And then, her vision was filled with a bright pink muzzle, a brilliant pink fizzy mane, and a pair of fiery bright cerulean eyes that seemed to have spirals swirling from the edge of the irises to the pupils. Their noses were touching. "Surprise!" sang the pink Earth Pony right into Twilight's face. And Twilight realized that it was the same Earth Pony who she had run into at the start of the day. The pink mare pulled herself off the hind legs, but Twilight, surprisingly, did not bow under the weight of an Earth Pony mare, who surely weighed more than she did. It was almost as if she was floating of her own power. It's probably some recessive Pegasus magic, Twilight thought nonchalantly, and seemed to do a mid-air pirouette as she spun around to land in front of Twilight with an uncommonly wide smile with very white teeth. "But my name is a surprise. I mean, that was the name of my Granny Pie. But my Granny Pie taught me that the pies are like this, are absolutely truly the best icebreaker there is. I didn't agree with a lot of what she told me, but he loves my pies. Every pony loves my pies, because no pony has really partied until they partied a Pinkie Pie party. My name is Pinkie Pie, and I threw this party together just for you. Was it a Granny Pie? No, wait, this party can't possibly be my Granny Pie. She doesn't need lazy filth right now. It wouldn't be possible for one pony to be a party anyway, because a party is just one that's sad and boring. Well, I meant to ask, was this Granny Pie party a surprise? Was it? She said all of it in one breath, and very quickly, and most of it while bouncing around Twilight, cartwheeling and somersaulting, backflipping and front-flailing, bouncing around as if her tail was some sort of spring. She made Rainbow Dash look like a sloth. Very surprised, Twilight said numbly. She spent so much time today trying to dodge social interaction in the hopes of getting to Golden Library to research Nightmare Moon. But now she walked right into a party. Libraries are supposed to be quiet! This is silly, Philly, giggled Pinkie Pie. What kind of Pinkie Pie welcome party would this be if it were quiet? Duh! Boring! With a heaving sigh, Twilight began to try aimlessly through the party, avoiding eye contact with any pony. She passed all sorts of ponies, with all sorts of different levels of excitement at seeing a unicorn straight out of Canterlot. All of them attempted to talk to her, or to Spike, but they might as well have been trying to talk to a wall. Twilight wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she sure knew when she got there. Meanwhile, Pinkie Pie just kept on talking.
I mean, you remember me for Task Grade, don't you? You were all like, hello! And I was like, ah!
She did an exaggeration of her rendition of her already exaggerated gasp for that morning, and Twilight and the others looked at her as she floated up, wondering if she was having a seizure. Then she dropped right back on the ground and continued without pause.
Remember that? Because I do. I've never gasped like that before in my life, and not even when I saw that rainbow. You see, I've never seen you before, and if I've never seen you before, that means you're new to Ponyville, because I know every pony in Ponyville. And if you're new to Ponyville, that means you don't have any friends here, and that made me so sad. But then I got really happy and had a great idea to make you feel really cool, you know, like, boo! And that was why I went and, ah!
Exaggerate gasp and grabbing the flying ground again.
When I saw you, the great idea I had was to throw you a super duper looper whooper yooper welcome party just for you. When I invite every pony in Ponyville to welcome you and be your new Ponyville friends. Isn't that just so great? Now you have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of friends.
At some point, around Pinkie's second grasp, Twilight had reached the table, set with all sorts of drinks and some leftover Apple family foodwares. She saw a dark brown bottle, took it to Rimmer Simmer, and took the cups out of the table, and tipped the whole bottle back into her mouth.
Wow. Do you like to drink that, Twilight? Piggy said, tilting her head. I usually like to put a dollop or two on my cookies before I eat them, but whatever floats your boat.
Twilight's eyes almost popped out of her head. She only just now realized what she was drinking, as he barely registered Apple's asking, "Sugar Cube, are you all right?" Before she tore off across the library, toward the stairs and in the back, the bottle was clattering to the floor. It felt like her mouth was on fire, as she needed water, as she didn't trust anything that Pinkie set on the table.
Aww, she's so happy she's crying.
Pinkie squealed. Around her were Spike, Applejack, Rainbow Dash, flying in the air, Rarity, and Fluttershy, with the exception of the smiling, seemingly oblivious Pinkie Pie. All of them were looking concerned for Twilight. Spike bent down and picked up the bottle that Twilight had dropped. He read the label. Hot sauce. It took Twilight the better part of 10 minutes to wash the taste of hot sauce out of her mouth in the bathroom. What kind of insane pony put out hot sauce as a condiment for sweets in a bottle that one put drinks in? It made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Of all the crazy ponies she had met out here in Ponyville, Pinkie Pie was without doubt the most suited for the asylum. Downstairs, she could hear the party had escalated by way of some sort of Oompa band working its way around the floor. Seriously, what business did a music band have being in a library in any other form other than the subject of a book, or if they were reading books on music themselves? Angry and weary, Twilight trotted up to the vacant bedroom in the upper levels of the Golden Oak Library. It was a miniature library of its own, but its book section was far narrower. Reading the spines told Twilight that she would not find what she wanted up here. A short staircase led to the mezzanine level that had a single bookcase. A window in front sat very familiar agave a cactus pear. Twilight smiled sadly at them. And a bed. The sun was long down by now, and there was no way that Twilight could possibly string together enough thoughts to write a letter to the Queen. And Spike was too busy partying with Pinkie and the others to be helpful. The party down below showed no signs of slowing down at all whatsoever. Twilight poked her head out the door, as she almost got pulled out a few times by Pinkie Pie, but dismissed herself quickly by calmly, truthfully, to have a headache. The party continued well past midnight and into the wee hours of the morning. Twilight had not stayed awake that late into the summer sun celebration when it was celebrating a Canterlot in her fillyhood. Seeing the whole notion of the celebration being awake almost 2 days straight, she had since become accustomed to late nights and being awake for over a day due to her self-imposed crush study sessions. But this! She flung herself onto the bed, pulling the pillow down over her flattened ears. Sometime around half after 2 in the morning, Spike had barged into the room, wearing a lampshade over his head. The music intensified with the doors opening, and Twilight buried her head as deeply as she could in the covers. "Hey, Twilight! Pinkie's carting up a game of Pin the Tail of the Pony! Wanna play?" It had all been Twilight's favorite game to play with Spike when he became old enough to understand how to play games. Spike enjoyed it as well, especially when playing with Twilight. "No!" Twilight bellowed. All the ponies in this town are crazy! Do any of them have any idea what could happen this morning if there's even a morning? Oh, Mom, Twilight, listen up. It's just a party. But what a party it is. Pinkie Pie wasn't lying when she said she throws the best parties ever. But Queen Celestia might have... Queen Celestia probably knows what she's doing, Twilight, Spike said with a surprising sage. She knows just about everything, doesn't she? Twilight had no answer to that, and Spike decided to rejoin the party, while there still was a party to be had. With a heaving, frustrated sigh that failed to carry all the attention that Twilight was carrying, she laid back onto the bed, clutching the pillow in her forehooves. Here I thought I was going to find some downtime to study up on Nightmare Moon and the elements of harmony, and have Spike send a letter to Her Majesty the Queen before it's too late, she thought bitterly. But, silly me, all of this stupid friend-making has eaten up my time I could have put towards finding out anything. She threw the pillow up in the air with her swimmer shiver and punched it repeatedly with her forehooves. Her right foreleg was somewhat sore from Applejack's overzealous host's. She didn't know how long she kept it up, but she knew that it outlasted the partygoers' music-making. She didn't know how long she lay there, sobbing, silently, but she knew it was close to 5 in the morning. Less than an hour to dawn, maybe, when she looked out the window at the moon. The Luna Maria in craters took the shape of a unicorn, or alicorn, mirroring the profile seen from the left. Until the past day, she had not given it much thought. Now she realized that was probably the likeness of Nightmare Moon herself, staring down at Equestria with envious eyes towards Queen Celestia's throne. There were 4 stars around the moon that glimmered particularly brightly. After 50 score years have passed since the Queen of the Night's interment, Twilight recited to herself, the stars will undo her shackles on the longest day of the year, and she will descend from her celestial cell and darken the sun and turn the moon to blood. Unless she is cleansed by the 6 swimmer crafts, she will bring nighttime eternal, and all life will perish. You simply must stop reading those dusty old books. Queen Celestia's words echoed in Twilight's head, and she almost imagined the Queen laughing dismissively as she thought of them. Twilight continued to look down at her mother and father. They would be affected more immediately than normal ponies by Nightmare Moon's return, not being ponies anymore. She looked up at the moon again, trying ignoring those 4 stars that seemed to be glowing more brightly than before. I hope that Her Majesty is right, she whispered to herself, slipping down to the floor and placing a hoof around each pot that her parents were in. I hope that it's just an old breezy tale. The door slammed open. It was Spike, now devoid of the landscape. Come on, Twilight! It's time to go watch the sunrise! The atrium of the gazebo was larger than the Golden Oaks Library ground floor, but was still not quite large enough to contain all of the ponies who lived in Ponyville. Many of them had to watch the sunrise from outside the gazebo. The situation was somewhat exaggerated by those who dared to travel to Ponyville from around Equestria to witness the summer sun celebrate its first hoof. All told, there were at least 5 gross ponies who were there to bear witness to the rising of the sun on the day of the summer solstice. This was why it was recommended that ponies attempt to make it to the gazebo at least an hour before sunrise, so they would not miss it. To her own mild astonishment, Twilight made it to the atrium of the gazebo, beside a table set with some Apple family appetizers. To the credit of most Pegasi, though, they had taken flight to allow for more non-flying ponies to fit into the atrium. Sitting on Twilight's back was Spike. Beside her were Pinkie Pie and Applejack, and above her was Rainbow Dash, who seemed to be grinning boldly at Fluttershy. The yellow Pegasus was hovering by her chorus of all sorts of birds behind the podium, idly chirping with them as they warmed up for the impending performance. Rarity was up on the mezzanine, by the balcony over the podium. Flanking the podium itself were a number of royal guards of all 3 pony races, their golden armor sparkling amidst the glimmer of Rarity's decorations.
Isn't this exciting?
Piggy asked Twilight excitedly.
Are you excited? Because I'm excited. I've never been so excited. Well, except for that one time I saw you walking toward the town. I was like, oh! But, I mean, really, who could top that?
Twilight cocked an eyebrow at Pinkie Pie, and then the bird chorus rose in volume, serving out the anthem of the diarchy of Equestria. In spite of her nerves, and her hoping against hope that she was wrong, Twilight felt a swell of pride at being an equestrian when she heard that leitmotif. Stepping up onto the pony was a stout middle-aged surf pony mare,
and a pale amber coat and a waving silver mane. The mayor of Ponyville. She had a cutie mark of a rolled-up scroll bound by a blue ribbon. She wore a pair of pince massot glasses, a white collar, and a bluish-green caveat. Once the anthem had finished, she clapped the forehook against its floor for silence, so she didn't need to. All eyes were on her. All eyes but Twilight Sparkle's. "Ladies and gentlecoats," the mayor began, "it is my great pleasure as mayor of Ponyville to announce the beginning of the Summer Sun Celebration." Every pony, save Twilight, began to cheer and, if they could, caught their foreheads to the ground as applause. Twilight was looking out at the gap between the pillars above the hallway, although she could clearly see the moon. "It is also my great pleasure to offer my welcome to one Miss Twilight Sparkle." Twilight, startled at the mention of her name, saw a pupil of Queen Celestia herself, who was come to assure that the Summer Sun Celebration preparations were to the Queen's standards. Ponies applauded more, cheered and whistled. Pinkie Pie shouted, "Twilight Sparkle over here, everybody!" And soon Twilight was having to wave sheepishly at any pony who looked her way. The mayor continued, "Now, in just a few moments, we will watch the magic of the sunrise." Twilight's attention drifted away from the mayor's speech. It was the same sort of speech she read in every book about every sun celebration ever. She looked back up to the sky. The faintest tint of pink had entered the sky, and a thin sliver of golden sunlight peeked up from the unseen horizon. Maybe the Queen was right, Twilight thought, closing her eyes and smiling to herself. Not all prophecies come true. You know this, Twilight. Forget-me's prophecy won't come to pass, so just enjoy the summer celebration and leave for Canterlot as soon as it's... Oh... Twilight had reopened her eyes, glanced up at the moon again. For a moment, she thought nothing of it. Then, in a double take, Twilight realized in horror the 4 stars around the moon, and the Luna Maria of the Mare and the Moon were gone. Twilight's ears went flat, but it seemed no pony had noticed. Why hadn't any pony noticed? Surely they heard her before they sprung the surprise party on her. Were they really so enraptured by the idea of seeing the majestic and beautiful Queen Celestia in the flesh that they couldn't bear her frantic warnings in mind? Oh, right. "Bringer of all harmony to Equestria," the mayor continued, "the good, the wise." Fireside turned to signal to her bird chorus, "Her Majesty Queen Celestia!" The curtains of the balcony over the mayor were drawn back. The bird chorus soared in song, and the ponies cheered and clopped, but there was nothing but blackness. The birds stopped singing. The ponies gasped and started muttering to one another. Twilight whispered to herself, "I have a bad feeling about this." The mayor tried to remain order, despite sounding shaky herself. "Remain calm, everybody! There must be some logical explanation for this!" "Oh, I love guessing games!" Pinkie shouted, but Twilight paid her no mind. "Is she saying somewhere back there? Come out, Queenie Sally!" Verity, who was the closest to the balcony, looked over the balustrade into the balcony and inspected the dark room behind. She emerged, looking startlingly pale. "She's gone!" She called down to the gathered herd. Whatever semblance of calm there had been was broken. Nervous murmurs became sharp screams of terror. The ponies began to look back and forth amongst one another, wondering what could be done without the Queen. But Pinkie, on the other hand, "Ooh, she's good," she said bubbly as she looked up at the balcony where Rarity was, and screamed in true fear. Twilight, who had not been associated with Pinkie's fearful screaming, looked up where the pink pony was looking. Behind Rarity was coalescing a cloud of sparkling blue mist. It formed together in a solid equine shape, taller than any pony save the Queen. A long, deadly pointed alicorn emerged from the narrow head, carapatic wings spreading from its back to the ceiling. Shape gave way to form, and an alicorn as blackest and darkest night appeared. She wore a pale blue battle helmet, a matching armored collar, and armor across her legs. Her mane and tail were comprised of the same mist, and her flank was blotched with nebulous, deep purple shapes. Each flank was emblazoned with a pale crescent moon. She was built, lithe and slim, like a predator. Her alicorn could have gone to buffalo. Her wings were a bat's, and her unicorn-like tail swished like a snake. "Oh no!" Twilight whispered in fear. Spike fainted from her back. The dark Alicorn's appearance, following Pinky's scream, petrified the ponies in the atrium. As he cast her silent eyes, people slid like a cat's about her stunned audience, and when she spoke, it was with a voice like honey coating a silver dagger. "Oh, my beloved subjects," she said, smiling down upon them like a predator. Rarity, having finally noticed the dark Alicorn right behind her, turned and stood stock still, spoke. "It's been so long since I've seen your precious sun-loving faces." She spat the word sun as if it were a poison. "What did you do with our queen?" demanded Rainbow Dash, who prepared to shoot herself at the dark Alicorn. Applejack threw herself in the air, hurling herself down on Rainbow Dash before she could fire the intruder. "Whoa there, Nellie!" hissed Applejack to the prone Pegasus. The Alicorn chuckled darkly. "Why?" she asked, bearing a mouthful of fangs. "Am I not royal enough? Do you not know who I am?"
"Oh, my guessing names!" Pinky asked eagerly. "Let me guess. Your name is Huggy Smokes. No. How about Green Meanie? This sword? Or that cord? Black Beauty. Oh, I know it. I definitely know it. This one's definitely it. Black Sting! Black
Any further guesses were interrupted by Applejack using her tail to flick a piece of apple pie into Pinky's mouth. The dark Alicorn cast a black glare about the room. She leaned in toward Fluttershy, whose wings had locked up in fright. Rainbow Dash looked mutinous. "Does my crown no longer count now that I've been present for 50 years?" She turned to Rarity, her misty mane that sparkled to the stars, reaching down and cupping Rarity's chin. "Did you not recall the prophecy? Did you not see the signs?" "I did!" Twilight shouted, who had worked up the nerve to stand up while every pony else cowered. The dark Alicorn cast her devilish gaze upon the lavender unicorn. Their eyes met, and Twilight glowered in spite of her overwhelming desire to run. "And I know who you are! You're the Mare in the Moon! Nightmare Moon!" Ponies all about the atrium looked back and forth between Twilight and Nightmare Moon in terrified disbelief. There was no gasp or scream that could elucidate the fear that filled each and every pony in the atrium at that moment. A mare who had to form from prance shrieked, "Not to mention a week!" in terror before fainting. Nightmare Moon laughed to herself. Well, some pony who remembers me." Her wings flapped, and the starry blue mist of her mane and tail began to swell and swirl like a typhoon. "Then you should also know why I am here!" Twilight's ears drooped. She felt her willpower sapped. She could see the suit of sunlight in the sky, beyond the pillars dimmest and die. You're here too? Nightmare Moon chuckled to herself, raising an armored forehoof. "Remember this day well, my little ponies," she said, with all of her teeth bared, "for it will be your last!" With a loud, terrible creaking noise, the roof of the gazebo was swept off by a swirling blue mist. The moon was now directly overhead, and though it was now past the hour of 6 in the morning, it was dark as midnight. "From this moment forth," Nightmare Moon declared, "the night shall last forever!" Her laughter echoed as legion, compounded by the flashes of lightning and the sound of thunder. And in that very moment, every pony felt as though an icicle were plunged into each of their hearts.